So whether you are leading a team, a stay-at-home mom, growing your business, understanding your purpose, understanding what is adding to your joy, what is stealing your joy, what those key motivators are, and understanding how they're physically attacking or propelling your body and life forward, that is the bottom line of it all. Because if you're struggling to get clients, if you're struggling to grow your business, if you're struggling to keep your head above water, if you're struggling to get your kids to listen to you, if you're struggling in any aspect, that realignment with yourself is the answer.
Jen Gomez, it is an absolute pleasure both to meet you again and to welcome you to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. It is such an honor to not only be a guest on your show, but to have met you in person. We had so much in common, and I'm really excited to go deeper into the conversation today.
Well, so am I. We met in Phoenix a couple of weeks ago. It's a long way from Ireland, but it was worth the trip. I met a lot of lovely people, but we connected immediately, and our conversation seemed to very quickly drift towards purpose and fulfillment, which is, I suppose, it's the essence of why I started the Inner Entrepreneur podcast. I've been an entrepreneur for 40 years. Much of my tribe and the people I connect with are entrepreneurs. And I find that so many people have built successful businesses, and along the way, they have lost themselves. And ultimately, what you find is that building your bank account does not address what might be missing inside. And often too late, they realize that I'm not going to say they've lost their soul, but they've lost connection with who they really are. They've lost purpose. There's less fulfillment in the life. They have success now, and they're wondering what it's all about. And you and I really connected on that point. So what led you to the conclusion that purpose fulfillment was the most important thing to you?
Well, first of all, I'm getting a lot of text messages, as you can hear.
That's from clients who love you. That's from
That's
clients who love you.
more that. Because the number one thing that does not bring me joy is technology and understanding how it works. So that's why we hire people to help us, right? So when did I really understand purpose and fulfillment? It was there are three massive moments in my life that really shaped the person that I am today. And without going too much into detail, the first was when I was 18 years old, and my mother was in rehab for alcohol, and my father, very militaristic, didn't really know what to do with me. And so my parents divorced when I was very young, and I lived primarily with my mother, and I found myself getting kicked out of my father's house, and I battled a lot with that, with shame and guilt, and oh well, what if I was better? What if? But at the end of the day, I found myself on my own at a very young age with no mentorship, no guidance. And I had to really find out who I was. And Paul, I went the opposite direction of where I should have gone, and was honestly should have ended up in jail or dead. It was a bad situation. And there was a teacher that saw something in me. She saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, that I had never seen in myself. And it was that glimmer of hope and glimmer of inspiration within me that made me make this massive shift in my life. And so that really was the major pivot within me that said, okay, you can overcome, you can shift gears, you can be somebody different and do something better with your life. And from that point, I started to understand how beautiful life was and understand how enjoyable life can be, and not in the sense of hedonism,
Mm.
but in the sense of accomplishment, and it almost became my new addiction. So now I had phase two of my life where I became extremely hungry for being recognized, right? So now I'm in this field of I'm going to be the best of the best. I again, I call it an addiction.
Mm.
it was this like, okay, I got a job. I'm going to be the leader within that job. Okay, I'm in an organization. I'm going to be the president of the organization because I thought that my purpose was to achieve. And then I got to a point, this is now phase three, where I had the job, I had the husband, I had the career, I had the money, the awards. I was living this life that little Jen could never have imagined. I had it all.
Mm.
And what did I do, Paul? It wasn't enough. I had to add and add. I started running a business. I went back to grad school because I didn't feel worthy enough. I didn't feel fulfilled. I just kept adding and adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. And one day, it all got ripped away. We were talking about this earlier, how the business that I had built was foreclosed. The career that I had built was gone. I had been let go, and my contract had ended. And it was a really big wake up call of what am I doing?
Mm.
Why am I sitting here waiting for approval, waiting for recognition, waiting for somebody to tell me, Jen, you're doing a good job, when I just needed to do that for myself?
Mm.
I needed to realize that I needed to stop looking outward and start looking inward. And so I started researching purpose a lot, and really where I leaned heavily was into joy. The root of the word joy, the root of the word enjoyment, the root of the word fulfillment. Why are we all so unhappy? Why are we all just stuck in this cycle of chaos and crisis and complaining? Honestly, it's getting annoying. Like it's enough is enough. If little Jen that had nothing could reroute herself to become influential and build businesses and then reroute again to become fulfilled, open a business to where she teaches people how to find more joy in life, then why can't others do that too? And so, Paul, that's the long story long of how I got into becoming the joyful strategist and helping others really identify fulfillment, purpose, and most importantly, the joy of being them and the joy of their life.
You describe the typical A-type personality, I think, as we know it, which I suppose all entrepreneurs or most entrepreneurs have, which is this desire to go out and build something and achieve something and want more and more, which at its essence is a positive thing because it fuels everything in the world. I mean, everything is fueled by you know, inventors and creators. That's all entrepreneurship. So it's a very positive trait until we take it too far. Um, and I think that's also the nature of us people with this A-type personality, is that we don't know when to stop. We just keep going and going and going. What's interesting to me is, to some degree, you were forced to take this moment of reevaluation. But what you had there, which I think is quite unique, is you had a moment of insight, because most people in that situation, to some degree, they would have come to the same conclusion, but the conclusion would be, I just need to go and build again, which is obviously what you've done. but the foundation of that building has been very, very different. You've gone, well, I need to start by understanding how can I be fulfilled? What's my purpose? And then once I'm clear on that, once I already have that sense of purpose and joy and fulfillment, now it's okay to go build, but I'm not chasing that which success can't give me.
Absolutely. And I had to get really clear on my values and my priorities. And as you know, I have two young boys, they're 5 and 9. And looking back on when my children were born, and I was in such a hurry to get back to work. With the firstborn, I was angry when I found out that he had to be 4 months old to get into daycare. What am I gonna do? Because of this hustle culture, right? We have to get back to work. We have to get back to what's important. We have to get back to the deadlines. We have to. Meanwhile, my son was secondary.
Mm.
And then the second son was born. What did I do? I brought him to work with me. He was 4 weeks old. Brought him to work with me. I had a little bassinet in the office with me.
Wow.
Now I do think that there is a bigger societal issue here where at some point there should be encouragement to be a mother to your child, to be a father to your child, to take the time that's needed to raise your children. But that is something that I nor you or any one person will be able to change overnight. So that's where it's so important for us to have that internal connection of what am I willing to sacrifice for success? And so many of us sacrifice our children. I once worked for a woman in Los Angeles. I was the nanny for her kids. And I remember her daughter would just be holding on to me because she didn't want for her mother to come home because she was never there. She felt more of a connection to me than she did with her own mother because she worked all the time. And while I think there's an incredible opportunity to show your children what hard work can do and what success looks like, I also think it's a balance because at the end of the day, children spell love Time.
Mm.
If you're not prioritizing time with your children, then I mean, that's the whole purpose of life is just to prioritize time with your children and that was not something that I was doing. And so that was a big reason why I decided to start building something again because I know that I am a builder. That
Mm.
is my purpose. I am a founder. I am a creator. I am an innovator. I have always been driven to lead. If you see any assessment I've ever taken, that will show you I am very driven to lead, but I needed to do it in a way where I felt more of an inner peace. And I could only do that when I started to, as we hear, I needed to live in the gain instead of living in the gap of everything I hadn't accomplished, the gap of everything I wasn't doing. And I needed to start turning that around and say, look at what I do have. Look at what I have accomplished. Why have I felt like that's never enough? Who do I feel like I am not enough for? Take a pause, redirect that, and say, okay, today I'm going to wake up and find joy in the ordinary, in the sun shining, in my son's smile, in my husband's embrace. And through that, everything else, all the awards, the money, the goals, they're what we call in Louisiana lagniappe. It's the extra.
Mm.
It's all the amazing things that are going to happen because you have already built a legacy. You've already built the influence. You know that you have the drive. But how can you redirect yourself so that when you do end up 6 feet deep, what is it going to say on your headstone? How are people going to remember you? The person who worked until 11 o'clock at night and woke up at 4 and was always unhappy? Or the person who strategically designed their life to be a beacon of hope and joy and light and inspiration for others? I think you can have balance, but it really takes a lot of grit to own where you're at and say, I am unfulfilled, I am unhappy, and I need to make some changes.
I wonder often if the reason why we can achieve so much and still be unfulfilled and unhappy is because of our definition and society's definition of success. And
Mm.
so if I say to you, my neighbor, my friend is successful, you will paint a picture of them in your mind. I will too. It's automatic, and that
100%.
and that picture will be one of material success. And I think at the root of this is our definition of success. And something I've done is redefine success, because if your version of success is just financial, you will never feel successful.
It will never be enough. Because what happens when you hit the $1 million mark? You want to hit the 5 million.
Mm.
What happens when you hit the 5 million? You want the 10 million. What happens when you hit the 10 million? You want the 20 million. When will it be enough? And then you talk about fulfillment. You talk about, okay, well, what's motivating you to get to the 20 million? If you're motivated to get to the 20 million so that you can give it to a country so that they can have textbooks and water, and that's what's motivating you and driving you to then have this fulfillment feedback loop, that's a different story.
Mm.
But are you driven for status, materials, that picture perfect success? You'll always be unhappy. You'll always feel unfulfilled.
Well, even if it is, to give it to charity or whatever, I still believe that there are multiple different versions. Success has many components, and I'm not for a moment suggesting that we don't pursue the material things, but I think we need to understand. And we spoke earlier of one of the processes I take people through is understanding what I call the unique personal drivers. And what we find when we do this is most people have 3 to 5 unique personal drivers. And for me, when I did the work, I found 4 personal drivers. And what I discovered is my life was driven by 4 things, 4 buckets, you might call them, that I need to fulfill. One of those buckets was wealth, which means I'm driven to go and achieve and build a business and invest in all those things. But it's one of those things. And for me, what that does is clarifies that I need to pursue that. So if I go decide I'm going to be a monk, I'm going to meditate all day, and I'm not going to pursue wealth, then I just won't be fulfilled because it's part of my drivers. But I need to pursue that as a component, as having family time, as taking care of my mental, spiritual, physical well-being, and also working on myself as a person and growing. When I combine all those and work them together, then I'm moving myself into the zone of fulfillment. But if I just pursue one of those, if I just pursue any one of those things, if I sit home all day with my family and go, well, my family are the most important, of course they are. But if I sit home 7 days a week, 24 hours a day with my family, I will become unfulfilled because there's other things I need. And so I think we need a broader definition of success, but I think we need to understand what what is required for me to feel fulfilled, to feel I'm on purpose, to feel the joy you spoke of. What's required for me, and it will be multifaceted. And so I
Mm,
think we need to combine all of those things, because even the person who goes and does phenomenal charitable work, they will have other drivers, and if they're
mm,
not meeting those other drivers, they may do that and still feel unhappy or have broken relationships or not.
mm,
I believe you need to be clear on what all those things are and create a plan to fulfill all of those.
mhm. And that's a state of balance, right? Which I've heard so many different schools of thought on balance of, oh, balance doesn't exist, or you have to find balance, or which at the end of the day, there is no perfect way to achieve what you're saying, right? You are trying every single day. You are taking a look at, and this is where that interconnectedness comes from, because you're able to identify which bucket you're leaning too far into, because you can feel something's off.
Mm.
There's a lack of fulfillment. There's something happening here, and I'm focusing too much on the wealth. I need to pull myself back into this state of balance. And whether you use the word balance or I think about, I'm sure you're familiar with ikigai,
Mm.
right? It's that centeredness. It's that full inner excellence of having full control of yourself, of your life. What do we have control over? Our thoughts, our words, our actions. Everything else is out of our control, but we do have the ability to mold our future if we identify those four pockets, if we identify what we have our control over. And I feel like so many people have lost that, or don't even realize that that is possible. They're so far down the well of, I think we talked about this when we saw each other in Phoenix. It's almost like people have found comfort in discomfort, this drive, this hustle, this complaining all of the time, whether it's a bad relationship or a bad work deal, or bad choices that they're making over and over and over, and you just have to shake them and say, stop, just stop. Your life is in your control if you allow it to be. But so many people are so far gone. And I think that those are the people that need this kind of work the most.
I think the word comfort, because I think that's what our bodies and mind are being drawn towards. I think I might call it familiarity, because it can be very uncomfortable, but we
Mm,
maybe it's just our brains, and maybe it's neuroplasticity, but we are drawn towards the familiar. And for
mm,
some people, the familiar is, we are familiar with working 60 hours a week. We are familiar with coming home and having a row with our partner or snapping at our kids. We are familiar with that, and we don't know how to walk a different path. We don't know how to do things differently. It would be very unfamiliar if we tried to live differently. And the question is, how do people break that? Now, you spoke about this thing, and I think we spoke about it in Phoenix, this inner sense, which I would use very much. I used it this morning. I just got up this morning, and I had a drain that need so my I had a lovely plan laid out for the day, and then I had a blocked drain which I had to get out and go, okay, now so I got to get out, I got to pull rods out, I'm going to. So by the time I was finished, and I'm not a great guy for the hand. I mean, I'm just not a handyman around the house, so it's just these things are challenging for me. But I had to get out, I had to get and do it. But I noticed afterwards that physically, I just wasn't settled.
mm,
And but because of that lack of settling, for want of a better word, I was kind of then in a bit, oh, I need to go and get this done, I need to blah 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 blah. And thankfully, I maybe had the experience to go, no, no, you need to stop now. You need to stop and draw a line. So I took time out. Thank you. Thankfully, I've been meditating for a very long time. So I took time out to go and meditate, and I went, I
mm,
have to sit in this place and I have to settle myself
mm,
until the balance restores. And the reason I think that's really important is because my belief is, after practicing meditation for 40 years, is that if I move into whatever is next from that state of disturbance, then that's the energy I'm bringing to that, and that's what I'm going to create. Whereas if I find that inner connectedness and get called the balance or whatever, then that's what I'm more likely to create. So it was a deliberate practice. I wonder, are most people not aware of that? Because it was a physical sensation inside of me.
mm.
It wasn't something I was imagining. And now, as I'm sitting here, I feel completely rested. I feel completely comfortable. So the physical state is completely different.
This is fascinating that you're bringing this up, Paul, because I'm writing a book. And I don't know that we've talked about this, but I'm
I
writing
don't
a
think
book
so.
called Live by Design, Taking You from Leader to Legend. And it is a book about joy, purpose, and fulfillment. But there's a theory that I've created within the book, and it's all about energy and the energy that we bring into a room, into our office, into our home, within ourselves. It is scientifically proven to ripple effect into everything that we do, right? So we take a moment to think about you said something happened to you today and it shifted your energy, and you had the inner understanding within yourself to diffuse that, to redirect yourself into a state of more of a joyful, positive centeredness.
Mm.
Found you can feel it, it's a physical
Yeah.
feeling. And you're absolutely right. People do not know how to stop it before it completely takes them over. So then you have anger, you have overwork, you have um, anxiety, you have all of these negative components that are then ripple affecting out into your life. I read something the other day that was really fascinating that said if you wake up in the morning and say to yourself, this is going to be the worst day. I just, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to move. I have this meeting. It's horrible. Now your brain is going to seek throughout the entire day these negative actions, these negative situations. Your entire day is going to be pretty bad because your brain is wired to do that. You've programmed it at the very beginning of the day. But if you can say to yourself, I'm so happy to be alive. It is going to be a great day. Have that meeting, but I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through it. Not forcing yourself to do that, right? Because sometimes we force it and we're like, oh, it's going to be such a terrible day, but I'm going to force myself to find gratitude, right? You have to fully lean into a state of wonder. I often tell my clients, you have to treat life like a playground. You have to go back to that childlike joy that you had of I'm invincible. Life is bright and fun, and I can't wait to see what's on the other side of today. Once you tap into that, your brain will automatically receive and seek only the positive. And what I was reading, they called this lucky girl syndrome. Like, those girls or, those people that just everything ends up happening for them that's good.
Yeah.
It's because they have rewired their brain to receive that. And what's so interesting is if you practice this over and over and over, just like you did today, it becomes almost instinctual where you can identify, oh, I'm a little unbalanced. Let me take a moment to meditate, to listen to my favorite song, to walk outside and feel the sun on my face. I call these joy anchor moments, these moments of inner grace and inner silence that can help you diffuse whatever's going on so that you can be open to receiving all of that abundance and all of that good that is there for you, but you have to be ready to receive that mentally, emotionally, and physically.
I've heard described that our brains are like deletion machines, in that
Mm.
there's so much information coming to us that we have to delete everything that's not relevant to us. So there's a massive amount of information coming in. We can only process this amount, and our brain effectively has to delete everything else, because otherwise it would be information overload. And I think in that process of deletion, that's where perspective comes in. So I don't think it's that when you get out of bed in the morning and you have this expectation or gratitude for the day, and you're setting up for a joyful day. I don't believe it's that you're magically creating something. I mean, it's all already present. Within your
Yes.
day, there will be moments. It could be tying your son's shoelace, and it could be the sun coming through the window. And the question is, but if you've programmed yourself to feel good, to feel joy, you will notice all these moments, and then you'll go into that meeting, and there will be positives and negatives. There will be opportunity and challenges, but the question is, what's your perspective? Because I literally think you're rewiring your brain, and your perspective shifts. But I also think that everyone listening to this, even if they think we've gone a little woo woo, will know will know that sometimes they feel good and sometimes they feel crap. And I would ask them just to take a moment to go, when I feel good, what does that feel like? And when I feel crap, what does that feel like? And now can I recognize both of those things and be attentive to that? So when you don't have to, I use the word energy because that's how I experience it. But if you don't use that sort of language and go, well, sometimes I just don't, will notice that. And then when you notice that you feel good, what can you do to maintain that? When you notice you feel crap inside, okay, so maybe what has caused that? And now what are those, as you said, call them joyful moments? Well, what are those things you can do? I went, thankfully, I had time. I literally just went and I meditated until I felt differently.
Mm.
Not everyone has the luxury of that time, but a moment to stop and just pause will often break the cycle and push you back in the right direction. But I think everyone listening will know, if you're in that crappy cycle and you continue to pedal in that pace, it only gets worse.
Absolutely. I have a client that she is extremely type A, extremely driven. She had driven herself into the ground, and she came to me. She said, "I need help. I am I am driving myself into the ground. I know that I'm taking on more because of this scarcity mindset." Like, she just felt like, oh, I need to take on everything. She is a very, very well-known photographer, and she was taking on all of these different projects that did not align with what she really wanted to do. And she found herself overworked. She was making the money,
Mm,
but she wasn't happy. She
yeah.
wasn't fulfilled. And so I recommended that she meditate, to take a massive step back. And Paul, she was unable to meditate.
Mm,
She was unable to stop her brain from thinking of everything she needed to do, of overthinking, of all of the decisions she had made or would make. And so I think that that is an incredible exercise in and of itself, is just, can you stop your brain for 10 minutes and completely connect with yourself? Because so many of us, as these high achievers, as
mm,
these driven people, what are we thinking of? What was I thinking of while I was holding my baby? I was thinking, oh, I have all these projects, I have all these things to do. Because the number one thing that most of us are fearful of is the fear of rejection.
mm,
We don't want to be rejected. We want to be the best. We want to because we don't want to fail. Why are we afraid to fail? Because we're afraid of being rejected, which I feel like fear is should not even be in the dictionary. Fear to me are just stories that we tell ourselves about the future that have not happened yet, right? So I
mm,
say fear is false. Fear is not something that's accurate. It's things that try to protect us. But I think that that is something that's so important. If we can encourage the listeners to do anything, it's to take a moment and see if you cannot think about anything other than being with yourself in that moment and just breathing. We don't ever do that. We don't take a moment to breathe. And I don't know if you've done any research on. I'm sure you have with your research in meditation, but just the practice of breathing and what it does
mm,
physiologically. I mean, it lowers your blood pressure, it regulates your nervous system. It is such an incredible practice that we are not doing enough. Just breathing, like breathing deeply. Because what
mm,
are we doing? We're all keeping our breath here in our chest because we're all so
mm,
stressed and we all feel the pressure. And guess what? That moment that you just release all of that and you feel that breath deep in your belly, you can completely feel your entire body shift. And you know what happens here, Paul?
Mm.
Your creative thinking is different. Your presence is different. Your energy is different. You will now walk into those meetings. You will walk into those negotiations. You will walk into those client pitches completely aligned with yourself.
I agree. I mean, breath is also one of the things I've studied for many years, and so it's part of my daily practice. When I get up, my first practice is a breathing practice before I meditate. But what I found very interesting being a long-term meditator is that I agree to a lot of people find meditation difficult and they find their minds are crazy. I've been doing it for a very long time. To some degree, that always remains because our minds are crazy. So when we have the goal to eliminate that, it's kind of it's probably never really going to happen. But what I found is when you become proficient at meditation, you begin to meditate, and then your body begins to quiet, and your breath begins to settle and steady, and then your heart begins to quiet. Your whole physiology comes into balance, and many people maybe can't persist with it long enough or become proficient with it long enough to really experience that. And what I've been suggesting to, and this is where breath comes into play, I believe, because if you can lean into particularly coherent breathing, where you maybe breathe in for 5 seconds, out for 5 seconds, and you get into this natural pattern, and you can find, literally go to iTunes or something, and you'll find these things, you can just play them. But if you struggle with all the mental activity, but then you drop into going, well, my mind's crazy. I feel I can't meditate. Okay, fine. Sit down, close your eyes, and go to iTunes and look up, or YouTube and look up coherent breathing, and get something that's going to give you inhale, exhale every 5 seconds, and just follow that for 10 or 15 minutes. So what I've realized, and maybe should have dawned on me many years ago, is it works both ways. So if you quiet the mind, it eventually settles down the breath and settles down the heart and settles down the body. But if you practice, if you go, I can't settle that down. But if you start with just the breathing and settle in and go, but I can breathe, I can pay attention to my breath for 10 minutes, that will literally work its way from the ground back up. In other words, it will take you to the same place. And
Mm,
so if I am overworked or over busy, I will go to a breathing practice. I go, my mind's going crazy, fine. But in spite of that, can you sit here and do some gentle breathing? I think for the inexperienced person, which is probably most people, I think the breath is really, really a place to start. Jen, what I'm really interested in is a couple of things. One is I know you do a lot of keynote speaking. What are you most passionate to talk to people about when you get in front of an audience?
I have developed the joy method, and this helps you understand what you're bringing when you enter a room and why it's important.
Mm,
I talk a lot about the psychology behind energy. We've talked about this
mm,
before. I talk about epigenetics, really the science behind joy. And one really simple way to explain what the takeaway is from the keynote is think about those in your life that you've had a first interaction with, and it was good. It was a good
mm,
interaction. What are you most likely to do? You and I, for instance, we had a wonderful connection.
mm,
We're now on this podcast. We're interacting with each other. We're collaborating with each
mm.
other. We're making a greater impact together.
Sure.
Now, let's go back to that interaction again. What if I were standoffish? What if I acted like I was the most successful person in the room and so everyone else was less than?
Yeah.
You would automatically be turned away,
You disconnect.
disconnected.
Mm,
So, what I'm proving in the simplest of sense is that joyful moments build trust. That trust leads to collaboration, and that collaboration leads to a greater impact. So, whether you are leading a team, a stay at home mom, growing your business, understanding your purpose, understanding what is adding to your joy, what is stealing your joy, what those key motivators are, and understanding how they're physically attacking or propelling your body and life forward. That is the bottom line of it all. Because if you're struggling to get clients, if you're struggling to grow your business, if you're struggling to keep your head above water, if you're struggling to get your kids to listen to you, if you're struggling in any aspect, that realignment with yourself is the answer, because everything else will fall into place after that. And I actually call it out in the keynote that I know that joy is just something you put on Christmas decorations, right? Joy is something that is so looked down upon because that has not been the societal driver. It's been success. It's been keep your head down, let's work hard. And I'm here to redefine that. You're here to redefine success. I'm here to redefine joy. I'm here to say this is the number one emotion, we'll call it, that psychologists are not talking about. There is fear in alignment with joy, and I'm here to change that, because joy is what gives you influence. Joy is what builds your legacy. If you don't have full alignment with your joy, with your purpose, with your drivers, then everything else will fall to the wayside. You have to get that full alignment to have the influence, to be able to make change, to make an impact, not only within yourself, but within others as well.
And how do you define joy?
Okay, joy method. You have to have your purpose. You have to have your fulfillment. I really like to use Gavin Brian Bochet's feedback loop, right? And understanding that the definition of purpose is the best of what we have to give to others. If you think about when you feel most fulfilled, if you look at the very, very, very simple way of fulfillment, it's giving to others, whether that be your family or charitable work. I truly feel that if you are giving something to someone else and you see the fulfillment on their face, it gives you fulfillment back. If you are helping someone else and you see the fulfillment on their face, it gives you fulfillment back. So understanding, who are you? What is your purpose in life? And I think that purpose now has become such a hot word. If you've noticed, it's everywhere now. Everybody's like, find your purpose, find your purpose, find your purpose, find your purpose. And I think that purpose is different within everybody, because we all have different stories. We all have different drivers. We all have different traumas that are leading us to be driven in these different ways. So first and foremost, it's have that deeper connection with yourself. Be willing to get curious on who you are. Get curious on how you're impacting others. Without that curiosity and honestly the grit to make a change within yourself, and for some people it's going to be easier than others. Some people have a larger wall up and don't want to get over that wall. But for the ones that can accomplish that first step of curiosity, understanding what is really fulfilling me in this moment, that's the first step. And then the next step is to really drive that through communication, through trust within yourself, within those that are around you. Start seeing how this goes into that third step, how your energy is affecting everyone around you, right? So in order to really feel the joy that you are fully capable of achieving, fully capable of having, fully capable of giving out into the world, you have to know yourself. You have to see where you're showing up and how you're showing up. You have to own it. You have to own that positioning. And then you have to be willing to make the shift when you need to make the shift. You talked about having these 4 different buckets. You cannot make a shift into which bucket I need to shift into unless you fully understand where those buckets are, how much you're giving to one versus another. And at the end of the day, understanding your purpose, having that trust within yourself, giving the trust to others, and really leaning into the energy that you're bringing into a room, all of that will lead to a few things that will happen. You'll notice your relationships get better. You'll notice that if you are leading a team, the retention gets better. You'll notice that when you walk into a room, people are drawn to you more. There is such a difference between, going back to what I said just a few moments ago, people that you enjoy being around and people you don't enjoy being around. And I think that there's been such a societal standard of being a fear-driven leader. And now you talk about kind of masculine energy, feminine energy. I do feel that bringing in a little bit of feminine energy, bringing in what really brings you joy in the moment, can completely change who you are as a leader, as a business owner, and therefore what you're attracting in the long run.
So when a lot of people speak about purpose, I agree with you. A lot of people now are talking about purpose, but they are connecting it, rightly or wrongly, I believe, to success. It's like
Mm.
somehow if you find purpose, you will be successful. Um, when you talk about, every time you spoke about purpose, you did this,
Mm.
uh, and that suggests to me is that purpose is something inner. It's
Mm.
something you feel. Um, I also think that, I'm going to say, people's version of purpose can be too grand. They think, oh, I need to be Gandhi, or Martin Luther King, or whatever it is. They had a purpose, but each of us is called to different purpose. And I feel you feel it when you begin to connect with yourself. You feel that moment of, oh, I would say very, very simply, if you feel drawn to do something and that feels good to you, then you're moving towards your purpose. And I know we spoke about this earlier, but the mistake maybe people are making, society is making, is they're heading towards success, building success, and hoping when they get there they will have a sense of purpose. And it seems like what you're saying is that if we connect with some sort of sense of purpose, as in what feels like I'm drawn to do, well, that will just create a better environment around us. And ultimately, we all still want to be successful. And I think that will lead us towards success, or a more fulfilling version of success. Jen, finally, before we wrap up, when you go into companies and work with companies, how do you turn this into something practical that you teach them? Because if you
Okay.
come in and they're employing you to bring joy, I mean, how does that work?
Right, right. Because that no one wants to hear about joy. No one wants to hear about empathy. So I bring a lot of data with me.
Yeah.
I bring a lot of science with me. And I talk about how making a shift within yourself is the best thing that you can do for your team. One of the things I talk about is the psychology of today's employees, right? So we're talking more corporate here. And I know this is an entrepreneurial podcast, but this is just an example. So I talk about the psychology of today's employee. You can equally say this is we'll talk about the psychology of today's buyers as well. So, but we'll just talk about the psychology of today's employee. They want to feel, okay, yes, they want to feel part of something bigger. They do not want to feel like they are a line item. They do not want to feel like they are just another person, just a line item in the revenue budget,
Yeah.
right? We're hearing all over the place. For years, we have been hearing like, okay, 100,000 people got laid off. These people got laid off. We are in a fear society of being an employee, right? So how can you show up as a leader in your organization and make your people feel like they matter? So you think about, this is one tangible suggestion that I gave. So instead of doing annual reviews, do a monthly check-in and actually see how your team's doing, see how their families are. We're talking about people over profit, right? Now, when this happens, this tiny little shift, seeing what motivates them, seeing what their purpose is, see what brings them joy in the moment. Hey, how was your week? What's standing in your way of hitting your goals this week? And not from a revenue standpoint, but from a human interaction standpoint. How are you today? How are you this week? I think we've lost that human interaction. We've lost that human connection. We've lost those moments of joy, which then build trust, which then leads to that influential impact that we were talking about earlier, right? So it's really getting down to how are you leading your team? And what is the energy that you're bringing to that team? So often we want to just say, okay, HR, do another pizza party.
Mm.
And that is
Doesn't work.
not what people want. They want to make more money.
Mm.
They want more time off. Both of those are probably not in our control. So what is in our control? Making them feel like they are part of a bigger piece, like they're part of a bigger mission. But you're not even going to know how to do that unless you unlock that inner excellence, unlock that inner purpose within yourself. So you can say, oh my gosh, the problem isn't my employees. The problem is right here.
Mm.
I am not showing up in a way that establishes the trust. I'm not showing up in a way that establishes the ability to want to be able to collaborate, to want my people to come into work every day. So that's really more corporate side. For entrepreneurs, I find it incredible because it's a little similar, but we are in a trust market. People are only buying from people they feel they can trust.
Mm.
Where does the trust come from? This is where I'm redefining joy, right? Joyful moments. What does joyful moments mean? Simple interaction, human connection. You look at influencers, okay? Like social platform influencers. I'm talking about YouTube, Instagram, all of these people that have hundreds of thousands of followers. They're doing two things. They're showing up, they're building joyful moments with the people that are following them. Now, some of these people, they all they do is just push the contrary, but their audience likes that. That's a
Mm.
joyful moment for them. And then they're showing up consistently. So this is another piece of the puzzle, Paul, that I think that a lot of people forget. You mentioned it earlier about meditation. You can do something once, but it's staying consistent that builds the trust within your audience and makes them want to buy from you. So
Mm.
if you're an entrepreneur right now and you're struggling to make sales, maybe you've hit the $1 million mark, but you can't quite get to the $5 million mark. Number one, find out what's driving you. And are you really fulfilled? Is it just money that you're after? What is, take a whole look at your life. But then number two, understand that it really comes from that alignment within yourself that will then rebuild trust within your market, which will then add to more success in the long run. It all starts with internal alignment and detaching yourself from the result.
Yeah, it certainly all comes down. I suppose our whole conversation leads back to this point of how you're being with yourself, how you showing up, both with the people you work with, your clients, your customers. How are you showing up? Because that's going to have a huge impact on everything. Jen, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. I think it's been a great conversation, and I hope we've left the listeners with food for thought in relation to how they might show up from here on in. So it's been a pleasure, and thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you, everyone that's listening. Great to meet y'all.